Today, everything is gone. On October 30th, 2018, an angry mob stormed his shop and home and burned it to the ground. Malego managed to escape, but his girlfriend died in the flames.
For millions around the world, these are the images that have come to define South Africa. Shops burning, families fleeing, another eruption of violence against people whose only crime is the country named on their passport. And every single time the explanation is the same. They are taking our jobs, they are increasing crime, they do not belong here. But look closer, because something here doesn't add up. If this is really about economic survival, why is the rage aimed at the man selling bread on the corner and not at the men or the system who actually control the economy? Why does one poor man become the enemy of another poor man? We are going to explore the dark forces behind what is really going on here, what the mainstream media and narrative would describe as simply xenophobia is much more sinister and terrifying than this.
We're seeing vigilante movements using the frustrations of South African citizens, those, we have looking at 38% unemployment, for example, and using this language that foreign nationals are to blame. But with only about 4% of the South African population being foreign born, that clearly tells us that this isn't the case. And there's no evidence to suggest that foreign nationals are in any way to blame for these failures in the state to provide the services, the jobs, and so on.
This is not unique to South Africa, because we would follow the trail of these forces as they operate across Africa, even to the United States of America. But for us to do that, we have to go back to where it began. Most people would begin this story with apartheid, and it's easy to see why. It remains one of the darkest chapters in South Africa's history. But stopping at that is exactly what the enemy wants you to do, looking only at the surface. South Africa's relationship with violence is far older than apartheid. Long before colonial rule, kingdoms rose and fell over territory, cattle, trade, and power. One name still echoes from that era: Shaka Zulu. Apartheid did not invent division, it perfected it. It turned separation into law, humiliation into policy, violence into administration. Where you could live, who you could work for, what you could learn, how freely you could move in your own country, all of it decided for you. Though it officially ended in 1994 when Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first black president, the inequality it had designed into the system did not end with it. And more than 30 years later, millions of South Africans still live far from opportunities, attend failing schools, and remain locked out of real economic power in what are still called townships. Tell the people for generations that they are less smart, less capable, and that wound does not close just because the law changes. And therein lies the first clue to our mystery. In The Burden of Freedom, Dr. Miles Monroe writes that oppression conditions people toward unproductivity until laziness becomes a lifestyle, and jealousy, distrust, and hate become character. So when someone who looks like you comes along and starts rising, the same spirit of oppression compels you to pull them back down. Because for someone who has been bombarded by the system to sit around and wait for opportunity instead of taking responsibility, there is no greater insult than someone coming from behind and creating their own. What many people may fail to realize is that we are not dealing with new or uncommon spiritual forces here. We can trace their operation way back in ancient Egypt when Moses, a prince, risked everything to defend his own people only to be exposed by them. Pay close attention, because to deny that we are dealing with spiritual forces here is to contemplate with a mystery. And that is, who can explain how kicking one person out of their job will create the opportunity for another person, or burning down a shop would give another the capital to do the same thing? Is a job or a business simply an interchangeable chair that anyone can occupy irrespective of qualification, experience, or know-how? But here's the thing, for people drowning in frustration for years, the perfect conditions for the operation of the spirit of oppression, that complexity stops mattering. Therefore, before we judge the anger, we have to understand the despair feeding it. The numbers you're about to see are not just bad, but they reveal a generation that has completely lost faith in any possible future in their own country. In early 2026, South Africa's official unemployment rate stood at 32.7%. Among young people aged 15 to 24, it was 60.9%. That is not a weak economy. That is a generation entering adulthood with nowhere to go. Think about that. So when someone or a politician says that foreigner has your job, the claim doesn't need to explain the entire economy. It only needs to give the pain a face. And right here we see our second spiritual force in operation. The suffering of the people is real. The deception is in naming the wrong person as its cause. That is the force called the spirit of Cain. In Genesis, Cain brutally murdered his brother Abel for his frustration with God. We will explore this spiritual force deeper, but let's look at something. The foreign shopkeeper is visible. The system is not. He has a face, an accent, and a door that can be kicked down. And once leaders learn that blaming a visible outsider is easier than fixing an invisible system, desperation stops being just a social crisis. It becomes politically useful. So the next question isn't only why people believe the foreigner is responsible, but who gains from them believing that?
We've got many problems here. Problem legitimately raised. Huge levels of unemployment, high levels of crime, that's correct. But the finger is being pointed at wrong people. The levels of high unemployment in this country are not due. They are not due to undocumented Africans. The people who caused that, you look at it, that decline, they are laughing in a corner there.
So many people have wondered why it seems the government appears powerless in the face of those whom many have qualified as thugs. Well, this is the simple reason. Democracy, for all its benefits, has an unavoidable flaw, and that is, if a crisis is not politically useful, it is not crisis enough. The American social theorist Thomas Sowell put it bluntly, no one will really understand politics until they understand that politicians are not trying to solve our problems. They are trying to solve their own problems, of which getting elected and re-elected are number one and number two. Whatever is number three is far behind. Because foreign nationals are not eligible to vote, advocating for this vulnerable class of people at the risk of provoking thousands of unemployed youth who actually have the power to punish you politically is nothing more than political self-destruction. So the poor foreigner becomes the perfect political sacrifice, visible enough to blame, weak enough to abandon, and powerless to retaliate at the polls against those who fail to protect him. But notice who is most exposed. Not the wealthy foreign executive behind guarded walls, not the investor living in a gated estate. Money can buy distance, protection, and silence. The people caught in the fire are usually those near the bottom. And when that shop disappears, the customers do not disappear with it. They still need food, airtime, and household goods. So where does that money go? Perhaps to another small trader, or perhaps back to the larger chains, distributors, and household names that already dominate the market. So here we have the spirit of oppression and the spirit of Cain. And this is where we can appreciate the magnitude of operation of the spiritual forces. The spirit of oppression destroys the human spirit, the human agency. And such people, they cannot appreciate and love themselves enough to take any form of responsibility to reclaim their dignity. And then the spirit of Cain gives them an image, a person a face to redirect their frustrations on. That is the spirit of Cain. It does not create suffering, it redirects it. It takes a real wound, hands it the wrong enemy, and convinces one brother that the other must disappear before he can be blessed. Look again at South Africa. The unemployment is real, the inequality is real, the failures of leadership are real, but the migrant played no part in apartheid, they played no part in the design of townships, and they definitely have no control over the systems of bankings and mining or education. But like Abel, they are only standing close enough to catch the anger caused somewhere else. In Rwanda, we saw propaganda turn neighbors into enemies. In Congo, communities fight over minerals, all while being trapped in poverty together. In America, economic anxiety keeps getting tied to race and immigration, convincing one struggling group that another is the obstacle to their future. All throughout human history, where we can trace oppression, slavery, subjugation, we see these two dark forces in operation. They destroy the human agency and sense of responsibility, and they redirect their frustrations from their failures due to lack of taking responsibility to any suitable target around them. The Apostle Paul, writing, reminded us that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. Perhaps the reason why the enemy works so hard to keep our eyes fixed on each other. The South African sees the Zimbabwean, the brother sees Abel, the ruler sees the foreigner. Few recognize the ancient voice whispering the same lie: you cannot rise while he remains. And that is the mystery behind this fire we keep saying. The spirit of oppression creates the wound, the spirit of Cain points at the brother, and the powers of darkness profit from the blood spilled between them. So now that we have uncovered the real enemy behind the scenes, what does justice look like? The fact that the people behind this evil are themselves victims doesn't mean we stand by and watch it grow. So what should the rest of Africa and the world do? Some have called for boycotting South African multinationals, others threaten South Africans living in their own countries. An eye for an eye, a shop for a shop, a life for a life. But retaliation does not defeat the spirit of Cain, it only changes who plays Cain. Attacking an innocent South African abroad does nothing for the migrant whose shop was burnt, and destroying businesses that employ ordinary Africans may only deepen the poverty feeding the violence. The answer is not silence, but it must be pressure with purpose. Apartheid did not fall because the world attacked random white South Africans. It fell through internal resistance, international solidarity, and most of all, sustained pressure on the institutions keeping it alive. The principle was simple: make injustice too costly for those with the power to preserve it. That principle matters now more than ever before. Governments, international institutions, the church must make political indifference uncomfortable. Not through mob retaliation, but through targeted pressure at the key stakeholders, the elite families holding tight onto the system, and most importantly, the politicians who fan the flames for their own political gain. Though South Africa won political freedom in 1994, the economic and psychological battles are just beginning. The next liberation must confront both the systems locking millions out of opportunity and the spirit of oppression and Cain destroying the sense of responsibility, of agency, and the spirit teaching them to see a fellow struggling neighbor as an obstacle to their future. And one would normally assume this is where the church should lead. According to Romans 12 verse 2, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So as we conclude, we must remember, political injustice does not decide your potential. The unlimited potential of your Creator runs through your veins, and all it takes is a renewing of the mind for that potential to emerge. This is what South Africa needs from her kingdom representatives. As Dr. Monroe writes, true freedom is taking responsibility for your life. But both the oppressed and the oppressor need deliverance from the spirit of oppression before either can walk in it. As much as government reform and external pressures matter, personal responsibility cannot be outsourced to the system. Oppression explains the wound, but it does not excuse the evil committed through it. We must remember to walk in the example of our role model. Cain believed his brother had to fall before he could rise. Christ did the opposite. He took responsibility and paid the price so his brothers could rise with him. That is the only spirit strong enough to break the cycle. Not revenge, not denial, and definitely not more of hope without responsibility messages. Because this is a crisis and risks escalating as it brews even further. Today, the target is a foreigner. Tomorrow, another tribe, another race, another class, another party. Violence never stays loyal to the enemy it was first given. It always searches for another face. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please help us by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing, and dropping a comment down below. It really helps us with the algorithm. Also, let me know what you think South Africans can do to close this wide economic inequality or poverty gap. Before you go, if there are any other topics you would like us to explore, please drop them in the comments below. In the meantime, you can check these other videos that I've selected for you. I'm very sure you're also going to enjoy it. And I'll see you in the next one.